Have you ever lost someone and wished for just one more goodbye? I think about that a lot. There are nights when the house feels too quiet, and memories creep in with the sound of rain against my window. You keep moving forward, but you never really stop missing them, not really. Sometimes I wonder what I'd do if that chance came back around. Would I take it, even knowing it could turn my world upside down? Last night, just after 2 in the morning, I heard something I can't explain. My old radio, the one in the corner that's been silent for years, suddenly clicked on. At first, it was just static, soft, crackling like the hush before a storm. But then I heard my name. A voice drifted through the static, gentle and tired. I froze, hardly believing it. It sounded so familiar I felt my heart stop. Was it just my imagination? Or did someone I'd lost all those years ago finally find a way to reach me? If you were in my place, would you listen for more? Or would you turn away and try to forget? It was so many years ago, but I still remember every second of that night. It was 1987, and my brother Mark and I were just boys, heading home from a fishing trip. We were both tired and laughing about some old joke as we drove down those country roads. The sky started pouring rain out of nowhere, and the old pickup's wipers could barely keep up. All I wanted was to be home, safe and warm. Mark slowed down when we got to the old wooden bridge. You could hear the water rushing below, louder than ever. He looked over at me and said maybe we should wait out the storm, but I told him, "Let's just get across. Mom will worry." So he eased the truck forward. The planks creaked and the river was eating away at the edges. I held my breath, and then it was like the world fell apart. There was a crashing sound as the bridge gave way, and all I could see were headlights spinning into darkness, water pouring in all around us. Somehow I ended up on the muddy bank, bruised and shivering. But Mark was gone. They found the truck tangled in the branches the next day, half as broken as my heart. The police said he must have been swept away. Presumed drowned, they called it. But we never found him. Not a day has gone by since that I haven't wished I told him to turn back. My mother used to say some pain never fades. I know now what she meant. The years went by, but the feeling of loss never really faded. I moved to Maine after retiring, thinking a quiet place might help me forget. Some days I would sit by my window, staring at the rain, wondering what life might have been if that night never happened. The house felt too big and too empty. Old memories had a way of coming back, especially when the storms rolled in. One night, thunder rattled the glass and wind scraped the branches across the roof. I was about to head to bed when, out of nowhere, I heard a familiar sound, the brittle hum of my old shortwave radio coming to life. I hadn't touched it in years. Unsure, I walked over and saw the dial flickering in the dark. At first it was only static, that soft buzzing that always reminded me of empty air. Then something changed. I heard my name, spoken low and tired. "Jimmy, it's me, Mark." My heart nearly stopped. I just stood there, afraid to move, the room spinning around me. It was his voice, older, worn out, but somehow still Mark. The static grew louder, like the radio was breathing. I reached out and yanked the plug from the socket. But even then, the room felt colder, as though the past had pushed its way back inside. The next night, at exactly 2:09 in the morning, the radio clicked on again all by itself. My hands shook as I watched it, waiting to hear the voice. Would you listen if someone you lost spoke to you like that? Or would you turn away, afraid of the truth hiding in that static? Sleep stopped coming easily after that second night. Every sound made me jump. I kept a notebook by my side, scratching out numbers and times when the radio came alive. The voice never said much, just my name and sometimes a little bit more. I began to notice the frequency, almost like whatever was calling out wanted me to follow. I wrote down everything, hands trembling, hoping for a pattern. That signal seemed to point back to one place. The Madison River. It was the same river that had taken Mark all those years ago. It felt strange, chasing whispers and static back to the spot where everything changed, but I couldn't let it go. Early one morning, with fog settled heavy across the road, I got in my truck and drove through the drizzle. retracing the path in silence. When I reached the riverbank, the world seemed frozen in gray. Pines leaned toward the water, and the old bridge beams still stuck out like broken bones. I walked slowly, my mind tangled with hope and fear. There was a small fire burning in a barrel, and next to it sat an older man wrapped in a faded jacket. He looked up as I approached, his eyes pale and searching in the low light. A scar ran above his eyebrow, thin and white, the sort Mark had from an old childhood fall. Before I could say a word, he whispered, clear but soft, "You finally came." For a long moment I just stared at him, feeling the world spinning under my feet. I didn't sleep for 4 days after that moment, not a real sleep, not the kind that lets your mind rest. Everything felt possible and impossible all at once. The old man by the river was quiet, almost uncertain. He didn't rush to explain who he was, but as we sat beside the barrel fire and listened to the water moving past, he started talking in short, broken sentences. He mentioned a truck, the feeling of cold water, and how the headlights faded fast, swallowed up by the darkness. It was like he remembered pieces, but they didn't quite fit together. After a while, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, an old, rusted pendant on a chain. It was our lucky coin, the one Mark kept in his wallet for as long as I could remember. Seeing it there in his weathered hand made my heart pound. I hadn't seen that coin in almost 40 years. I tried asking things only Mark would know. Sometimes his answers sounded right. The name of our dog, the way Mom used to make scrambled eggs on Sundays. Other times he'd pause, searching, and get it wrong or lose his words. It was as if the memories had holes, and some of what I wanted to hear was just out of reach. I stared at him, and the more we talked, the harder it was to be sure. Could years of pain and confusion twist the truth inside someone's mind? Or was this really my brother, changed by time, or something else altogether, just wearing pieces of who he used to be? I needed answers, something solid to hold on to. What I wanted was more than just hope. I needed proof, something that would quiet the doubts swirling in my head. I turned to the old man and gently asked if he'd come with me to Portland for a DNA test. He looked down at the dirt beneath his boots, his hands fidgeting with that rusted coin, thinking for a slow, heavy moment. There was a sadness in his eyes, something I'd seen in mirrors but never in the flesh. Eventually, he gave the smallest nod. So we started that drive. The road twisted through miles of misty woods, rain speckling the windshield, each drop sounding like a distant clock counting down. For most of the ride, silence stretched between us, the kind of silence that almost hurts, where you want to say something but don't know what would help. Now and then, I'd glance over, trying to spot familiar gestures or little habits from childhood. There weren't many, but when we neared any bridge, he'd freeze up. His knuckles went white, his eyes shut hard, and he whispered under his breath, like he was trying to block something out. Sometimes he'd mutter words I almost recognized, as if memories were just beyond reach. The forest rushed past on both sides, pine and muddy leaves making the air smell old and sweet. The steady hum of the tires rolled on, mixing with my own thoughts, flashes of laughter at the riverbank, fishing lines tangled together, lost jokes and half-finished promises. The clinic in Portland felt too new, too clean, a giant world away from the river and the old house. Bright white lights glared off polished tiles, and everything echoed. Shoes on the linoleum, nervous coughs, the low voices of nurses waiting for morning coffee. All the while, my mind rattled with worry. Would a single test answer everything? Could a mouth swab match up all those years, prove what the heart had spent decades second-guessing? They took us through a quiet hallway and sat us down, one at a time. It was so simple. A quick swipe inside the cheek, a sticker with our names, and then nothing but waiting. Time stretched impossibly long. We sat side by side in worn blue chairs, staring at silent TV screens and a clock that seemed frozen at the same minute. In that waiting room, I kept spinning back through the years to the day of Mark's funeral. I remembered the emptiness of the casket, the way the pastor spoke about letting go, and how my mother clung to my hand like she never meant to let go. Her eyes were red, her voice hollow, but she made me promise Mark was truly at peace. I said what I thought she needed to hear, not what I believed, because I didn't have the strength to say otherwise. Now that I might have a chance to fulfill that promise, I felt every kind of fear. What if the answer split my world apart? If you ever got a second chance like that, could you handle whatever truth came next? There's something heavy about waiting, not just for results, but for a moment that could change everything you thought you knew. I sat in that room, listening to the old man breathing beside me, and sometimes I wondered if I really wanted to know the truth at all. We waited in that quiet room for what felt like forever, each minute stretching out, heavy with hope and fear. When the doctor finally called us in, her face was kind and calm. She sat down across from us, holding the test papers like they carried the weight of all my years. She spoke softly so we could hear every word. "Your brothers, there's no doubt." For a moment, I just stared at her, my breath catching in my chest. It was as if all the walls I'd built to hold back old feelings had splintered at once. My eyes stung, and I didn't bother to wipe the tears away. Relief rushed through me, but so did every bit of guilt for the years lost, for the questions I never asked, and the time I spent thinking all hope was gone. The old man sat in silence, clutching his coin, and then looked at me, voice cracking. "I thought I dreamed you." I nodded, my throat tight, trying to find the words. "You've been alive all this time," was all I could manage. There were no big speeches, just the feeling of something broken being pieced together. We both cried quietly, not because it fixed everything, but because we finally knew the truth. That moment was more than any number or report. It was the end of doubt, and the start of something new. We met with Dr. Hollies not long after the results came in. She was the kind of person who made you feel safe just by the way she carried herself. Gentle, honest, always careful not to rush the hard parts. Her office smelled of clean paper and wood polish, and the hum of the heater filled the silence as we settled in. She took her time, never making us feel like we were just another file or case. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. She explained to us in words anyone could understand, though the weight behind them was heavy. She said when someone goes through something so shocking, a terrible accident, the fear of drowning, a blow to the head, it's like the mind sometimes shuts out everything as a way to stay safe. You can wake up in a hospital or on the side of the road and not even remember your own face, let alone your name or your family. All the building blocks that make you who you are can scatter. What's worse is when you're alone, when nobody comes to claim you. You're at the mercy of whoever finds you next. She told us stories not to scare us, but to help us understand how real it is. People sometimes end up on the edge of towns, picked up by folks who never bother to ask about where you came from, only if you can work. You get handed a broom, a shovel, a bucket. You sleep in sheds or basements or empty shacks, and every day blurs into the next. Nobody calls you by your real name, and soon even you might forget what that name was. Her words cut deep. Mark listened quietly the whole time, staring down at his hands like he was counting the scars. Sometimes he'd nod in agreement, other times his shoulders would tense, small and quick. She asked if he remembered anything about those years. Mark said most of what he had was patches, broken pictures, a man's voice shouting orders, cold metal against his back, the whine of machines so loud it blocked out every other thought. He spoke about waking in the dark and running water making his chest tighten up. He told her he learned to keep pockets empty, to trust no one, and to disappear whenever he could. Even now, he said, he'll wake up some nights with his heart pounding, feeling like he's back in one of those sheds, hands dirty from work he didn't choose. He recoils at the sight of rivers or the smell after rainfall, as if water itself reminds him of something stolen. Sometimes the fear finds him sitting at our kitchen table, staring at nothing. Listening to him talk about all those lost years made me feel sick in a way I can't explain. I wanted nothing more than to reach back and rescue him, to give him back every birthday, every holiday, every gentle moment our family ever had. There's an ache in knowing that even with a second chance, you can't get back the time that's missing. Part of me longed for Mark to remember it all, to have every childhood memory restored, to laugh about our silly mistakes, our mother's soft singing, the comfort of quiet nights at home. But another part of me wondered, a part I'm not proud to admit, if maybe some memories are better left as shadows. If remembering all the pain, all the loss, would only open wounds that are just now starting to heal. If you had lost decades of your life to darkness, would you really want every piece of it back? Or would you rather leave the worst of it behind and start over? That question sits with me still, when the rain hits the window and Mark looks out, searching for something he can't quite name. Sometimes silence feels easier than asking for more. But every day, I hope the memories he finds are the ones that make him whole again. When all the tests were behind us and the truth lay out in the open, I brought Mark back to my place by the lake. The drive was quiet, and I could tell every new sound or shadow pressed at him in ways I'd never have noticed before. My home had always felt like a safe spot, filled with comfortable things and old family photos on the walls. But now, I walked through each room seeing them through Mark's eyes, each memory both a blessing and a burden. Our days fell into a slow pattern. In the mornings, I'd make scrambled eggs and toast, and sometimes Mark would just sit at the table tracing the grain in the wood, as if waiting for the past to come back to him through his fingertips. He avoided mirrors, turning his face away whenever he passed one. When thunder rolled over the water or the wind shook the glass, he'd freeze, small and distant, and I would sit near him, saying nothing, hoping that simply not being alone would help him feel safe. Still, cracks of light made their way in. I watched as simple things slowly tugged at long-buried memories. The smell of blueberry pie baking in the oven made his face soften. Once, as I set down a steaming slice in front of him, he smiled the smallest smile and said, "Mom always let me have the first piece." He remembered our old dog, Rusty, the way he used to sleep by the fireplace, warm and round as a loaf of bread. He even hummed the tune our mother sang while washing dishes. Sometimes these memories made him pause, eyes bright with something close to joy. Each detail felt like sunlight cracking through fog, pieces of himself finding their way home. We settled into quiet routines, walking down to the end of the dock at sunset, listening to the loons, sometimes just sitting side by side without talking at all. Most nights, Mark would fall asleep early, and I'd find myself watching over him in the soft darkness, grateful just to hear the steady rhythm of his breathing in the next room. One day, when the spring was just starting to thaw the ground, we drove out to the river together. The spot where everything changed had a new bridge now, smooth, sturdy, nothing like the old one. We walked together, the air sharp with the promise of rain. Mark stood there for a long time, looking at the water rushing below, hands clenched at his sides. After a long silence, he spoke softly, almost to himself. "I wasn't supposed to make it." The words hit me hard. I stood next to him, thinking about the years we both lost, the ways neither of us ever felt truly whole. I found myself saying, maybe neither of us did, not all the way. We let the silence hang between us, the sound of the river our only company. Sometimes healing isn't about finding what you lost, but building something new out of what's left. In the weeks that followed, little by little, Mark grew more comfortable. He started helping in the garden, taking slow steps toward living, not just surviving. Those short bursts of laughter, the way he asked, "What comes next?" They gave me hope that even after everything, there could still be a future for both of us. A few weeks passed and life started to settle into a gentler rhythm. Still, there were questions that lingered in my mind, shadows stretching over every new day with Mark. One rainy afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I dug out an old box from the back of my closet, the one where I kept letters, photos, and newspaper clippings from that time. I needed to face the past straight on, to look for anything that could explain how everything had gone so wrong for so many years. I spent hours reading through the old police reports. There was one document in particular that caught my eye. It described a body found near the river in the days after the accident. The report said the man was about Mark's age and size, found wearing a jacket almost identical to Mark's. He had no wallet, no papers, and just a faded name tag that was half torn from the water. Back then I was 22, numb with grief. When they asked me to identify the body, I looked for anything familiar. The swollen face, the jacket, the hair. It was all blurred by shock and pain. I was desperate to put an end to the waiting, desperate to believe my brother's story had finished. So I told them it was Mark. But as I read and reread the details under the yellow lamplight, I realized the chilling truth. The body wasn't Mark's. It belonged to someone who had drowned and drifted downstream, a stranger whose path had crossed ours by chance. The name tag in the wreckage had washed away, leaving only a guess and my word. My grief, raw and certain, had sealed the mistake. All these years I'd buried the wrong person. All these years our mother mourned her youngest son without knowing he was still out there somewhere, alive but lost. My heart ached as the weight of it settled in, a lifetime of prayers sent out to a grave that held someone else. What do you do with a truth like that? I sat for a long time, thinking about the way Mom used to kneel by Mark's headstone, fingers pressed into the cold stone, eyes closed as she whispered words meant to comfort herself, and a son she believed was gone. She spent her life sending prayers to the wrong grave, I thought. But maybe, just maybe, they still reached him. Even when we don't know where to send hope or love, maybe some part of it finds its way across years and silence, across rivers, and even through static. And maybe, at the end of everything, it's the hope we hold onto that matters most. The days get shorter and softer as spring turns to summer, and I find myself walking down to the river most evenings while the light fades. There's a peace in the way the wind moves through the trees, and how the water catches every color of the sky. I take the old radio with me sometimes, sitting on the rocks with my feet just above the edge of the cold current. It's not like before. The static on the radio isn't as sharp, and I'm not searching for voices. Still tonight, as dusk crawls across the water, I hear it, that low, gentle hum. The static grows for just a moment, and then a soft voice breaks through, barely more than a whisper. You didn't stop looking. Thank you. I close my eyes, feeling the weight of every year, every hope, and I whisper back, welcome home, Mark. In that moment, there's nothing left to chase or fix. Just the two of us, here together, and all the quiet forgiveness that comes with finding your way back. The river is calm, for the first time in decades. The surface ripples slow and steady, as if the world itself can breathe again. If you were sitting here, watching the sunlight fade on the water, would you call it a miracle? Or maybe just a message that never stopped trying to find its way through the static, no matter how long it took to arrive?